The woods are supposed to be peaceful, a place to escape the noise of the world, to reconnect with nature. But sometimes, something else is out there. Something that watches from the trees, something that waits. We hear stories, whispers in the dark, of those who ventured into the woods and never returned, of those who did return, but were never the same. These are 5 true stories of people who went camping and barely made it out. Stories that will chill you to the bone and make you question the darkness just beyond the campfire's light. Imagine sitting by the campfire, the warmth of the flames barely keeping the cold at bay. The forest around you is alive with sounds, but not all of them are familiar. You hear rustling leaves, a twig snapping, and your heart starts to race. Is it just an animal, or something more sinister lurking in the shadows? You try to shake off the feeling, but the sense of being watched is overwhelming. You grip your flashlight tighter, the beam of light cutting through the darkness, but revealing nothing. The campfire starts to die down and the shadows grow longer, more menacing. Your friends' faces are illuminated by the flickering flames, their eyes darting around, mirroring your own fear. The full moon casts an eerie glow on the forest, and for a moment, everything is silent. You can see your breath in the cold air, each exhale a reminder of your growing anxiety. And then, just at the edge of the campfire's light, you see it. A shadowy figure, barely visible. Your heart pounds in your chest as you realize you're not alone. You huddle closer to your friends, whispering in fear, hoping that whatever is out there will stay away. The campfire's light flickers, casting dancing shadows that play tricks on your mind. Your hand shakes as you hold the flashlight, the beam unsteady as it sweeps across the trees. The rustling leaves grow louder, and you can't shake the feeling that something is getting closer. Your eyes widen in terror as you realize the stories were true. These are the tales that will haunt your dreams, the stories that will make you question every rustle in the dark. So, gather around the campfire and listen closely, for these are the stories of those who faced the darkness and barely made it out. Deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, miles from civilization, a lone tent stood under the watchful gaze of the ancient trees. Inside, a young man named David settled in for the night, lulled by the crackling fire and the symphony of crickets. The stars above twinkled like distant lanterns, casting a serene glow over the forest. He had always been drawn to the solitude of the wilderness, the feeling of being completely alone, surrounded by nature's embrace. The forest was his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the chaos of everyday life. But tonight, something felt different. A shiver ran down his spine, a primal instinct warning him of unseen eyes. The usual comfort of the forest seemed to have vanished, replaced by an unsettling presence. Dismissing it as fatigue, David crawled into his sleeping bag, the nylon rustling softly around him. He tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination playing tricks on him, but as he closed his eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every rustle of the leaves, every snap of a twig seemed amplified in the silence of the night. And then, he heard it. A faint rustling outside his tent, like footsteps crunching on dry leaves. His heart pounded in his chest as he strained to listen, hoping it was just an animal passing by. With trembling hands, he reached for his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness as he scanned the area outside his tent. The light revealed nothing but shadows and the dense forest. David's breath came in shallow gasps as he tried to calm himself. He knew he had to stay alert, but the fear was overwhelming. His eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement. Slowly, he unzipped the tent and peeked outside, his eyes straining to see through the inky blackness. The forest was eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Gathering his courage, David stepped out of the tent, the flashlight his only source of comfort. He scanned the area, but there was no sign of anyone or anything. Reluctantly, he returned to his tent, zipping it up tightly. He lay back down in his sleeping bag, but sleep was elusive. The feeling of being watched lingered, making the night stretch on endlessly. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth as a group of friends, Jake, Emily, Ben, and Sophia, hiked deeper into the dense woodland. Their laughter echoed through the trees, their backpacks laden with supplies for a weekend camping trip. They had been planning this adventure for months, eager to escape the city and reconnect with nature. But as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows that danced ominously around them, a sense of unease settled over the group. It began with a feeling of being watched, a prickling sensation on the back of their necks. They would glance over their shoulders, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the forest remained eerily silent, save for the rustling of leaves beneath their feet. Then Jake swore he saw something move in the distance, a fleeting glimpse of a figure partially obscured by the trees. As night fell, they set up camp, pitching their tents in a small clearing. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance with the whispers of the wind. They sat around the campfire, telling stories and trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that had followed them since sunset. The fire's warmth was comforting, but the darkness beyond its glow felt impenetrable, as if the forest itself was watching them. Every so often, one of them would glance into the darkness, their eyes searching for the source of their unease. Jake, in particular, couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. His eyes darted around, trying to catch another glimpse of the figure he had seen earlier. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting eerie shadows that played tricks on their minds. They huddled closer together, their conversations growing quieter as the night wore on. Emily thought she heard faint whispers carried by the wind, but when she mentioned it, the others dismissed it as her imagination. Eventually, they retreated to their tents, but sleep did not come easily. The forest seemed alive with unseen eyes and unheard voices. Sophia lay wide awake, her heart pounding in her chest. Every rustle, every creak of the trees outside made her jump. As dawn broke, the mist rose from the forest floor, and the sense of dread began to lift. They packed up quickly, eager to leave the woods behind. The hike back to their car was filled with nervous laughter and relieved sighs. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had narrowly escaped something sinister. As they drove away, the forest stood silent and still, the whispers in the trees fading into the distance, leaving behind only the memory of a night they would never forget. The crackling fire danced in their eyes, casting flickering shadows that stretched and twisted into the darkness beyond. Laughter echoed through the trees, a stark contrast to the quiet rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. It was a perfect night for telling stories around a campfire, the kind of night that made you forget about the real world and lose yourself in the moment. But even in the warmth of the firelight, there was an undeniable chill in the air. A primal fear that lurked just beyond the reach of the flames, whispering to them in the back of their minds. You see, these friends had chosen a remote campsite deep in the mountains, miles from civilization and any other signs of life. They had told themselves they wanted to get away from it all, to escape the noise and stress of everyday life. But part of them craved the thrill of isolation, the adrenaline rush of knowing that they were utterly alone out there. As the laughter died down and the stories grew darker, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the shadows. The first scream pierced the night, so sudden and unexpected that it brought their conversation to a dead stop. It was a blood-curdling sound filled with raw terror and unimaginable pain. It echoed through the mountains, bouncing off the trees and sending shivers down their spines. Someone was out there, lost and alone, and they were in desperate need of help. Grabbing their flashlights, they ventured into the dark woods, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The forest seemed to close in around them, shadows moving just out of sight as they called out into the night. Finally, they found the source of the scream, a lone hiker, terrified and injured, but alive. They helped the hiker back to their camp, the sense of urgency and fear still lingering in the air. As dawn broke, they huddled together by the campfire, exhausted but relieved, knowing they had survived a night under the stars that they would never forget. Picture this: the sun sinking below the trees, casting long, creepy shadows across the forest floor. You're hopelessly lost, miles from where you're supposed to be. Every direction looks the same. Every rustle of leaves sounds like something coming to get you. That's where our story takes us tonight, deep into the heart of the unknown, with a group of friends who stumbled upon something unsettling. They'd been hiking for hours, their initial excitement fading with the daylight. Panic was starting to set in. Just when they were about to give up hope, they saw it through the trees. A cabin. A flicker of relief, like someone had lit a match in the darkness. But this wasn't a cozy log cabin with smoke curling from the chimney. This was something else. It stood there, dark and imposing, like a predator watching them. The wood was rotten, almost black in places, and the windows were boarded up, like it was trying to keep something out, or maybe keep something in. As they got closer, a shiver ran down their spines. This place felt wrong, off limits. They knew they shouldn't go any closer, but what choice did they have? With trembling hands, they reached for the door, hoping for shelter but fearing what lay inside. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dark interior that seemed to swallow the light. Inside, the air was thick with dust and cobwebs, untouched for years. Shadows danced on the walls, making the room feel alive with unseen presences. Fear gripped their hearts as they realized they were not alone. Suddenly a movement in the corner caught their eye, something quick and shadowy. They huddled together, their breaths shallow and quick, as the darkness seemed to close in around them. One of them fumbled for a flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, revealing an eerie figure standing in the shadows, watching them with hollow eyes. Screams filled the air as they bolted from the cabin, their only thought to escape the nightmare they had stumbled into. They ran through the forest, the moonlight casting eerie shadows, never looking back. Finally, they collapsed in exhaustion, far from the cabin, but the terror of that night would haunt them forever. Imagine this. The sun dips below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the still water of the lake. You're nestled by the campfire, sharing stories and laughter with your friends. It's the perfect camping trip. But as the fire crackles and the shadows lengthen, you notice something unsettling, a pair of eyes gleaming from the tree line watching you. That's the chilling reality that awaited a group of friends on their lakeside getaway. What began as a carefree adventure quickly descended into a nightmare they couldn't escape. It started subtly at first, a flicker of movement at the edge of their vision, a rustle in the undergrowth when no wind blew. They brushed it off as their imaginations, the product of too many scary stories around the campfire. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. As night fell, the feeling intensified. Every time they glanced towards the woods, they could swear they saw those eyes again. 2 pinpoints of light, burning with an unnatural intensity. They tried to rationalize it, convince themselves it was just an animal, but the feeling of being watched persisted, growing stronger with each passing hour. Sleep offered no escape. Every time they drifted off, the image of those eyes, cold and calculating, would jolt them awake. The woods were alive with unseen eyes, their every move scrutinized by something they couldn't comprehend. The laughter and carefree banter that had filled their days were replaced by a suffocating silence, punctuated only by the crackling fire and the frantic beating of their hearts. Days turned into sleepless nights. The eyes were always there, a constant, unsettling presence. They tried changing their routine, staying close to the campfire, even venturing out during the day to try and catch a glimpse of whatever was watching them. But it was no use. The feeling of being hunted, stalked by something unseen, never left them. The once welcoming embrace of the forest had transformed into a suffocating prison, the air heavy with dread. They were trapped, caught in the unrelenting gaze of something ancient and malevolent. The carefree joy of their camping trip had evaporated, replaced by a bone-chilling fear that seeped into their very bones. They knew they had to leave, to escape the watchful eyes of the forest before it claimed them entirely. the decision to leave was unanimous, fueled by a primal instinct to survive. Packing up their gear in a hurried silence, they broke camp, their movements frantic and desperate. They piled into their car, the engine roaring to life like a beacon in the darkness, a desperate prayer for escape. As they sped away from the lake, the headlights cutting through the oppressive darkness, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. The road stretched before them, a ribbon of asphalt winding through the endless darkness. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping branch sent shivers down their spines. They drove in silence, their eyes glued to the road ahead, afraid to look back, afraid of what they might see. The headlights illuminated the road ahead, but the darkness on either side felt alive, pulsing with unseen menace. Then, in a fleeting moment, they saw it. A shape, dark and indistinct, on the side of the road. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving them questioning their sanity, wondering if the fear had finally gotten to them. But deep down, they knew. They knew that whatever had been watching them from the trees had followed them, its presence clinging to them like a curse. So, the next time you find yourself drawn to the beauty of the great outdoors, remember these stories. The woods hold many secrets. Some are harmless. Others are waiting for someone like you to wander too far. The next time you go camping, listen closely to the sounds of the night, watch carefully from the shadows of your campfire. You might not be as alone as you think. Sweet dreams, if you can. The forest is a place of beauty, but also of mystery. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig could be something watching you. The stories you've heard are not just tales to scare you. They are warnings, passed down through generations. Warnings to keep you safe, to keep you aware. Because the forest is alive, and it remembers. It remembers those who respect it, and those who don't. So, as you lay in your tent, listening to the sounds of the night, remember these stories. They might just save your life, or at the very least they might help you sleep a little easier. Good night, and may your dreams be free of the lurking fear.